What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Offsetting Penalties Podcast. A little Halloween episode for you. If you're watching this on Halloween, the day this comes out, I appreciate you being here. If you're watching it afterwards, I still appreciate you being here just as much. We're talking some football today. Week 9. I just watched Baltimore versus Miami. I'll get into that in a second. Some storylines to talk about from that game. Big week, a lot of games, only 4 byes this week compared to last week's 6. So we're gonna talk some football. And no UFC this week, or no notable UFC. There's a Apex card, but this is a football week, and I'm here to preview the week for you guys, go through some of the big time matchups, give you guys some of my favorite bets for the weekend, and we'll be up out of here. So as always, I appreciate you being here, and I'm not going to waste any more of you guys' time. We're going to get straight into it, and before we get into week 9, into the previews, we're here. Baltimore 28-6 over Miami on Thursday night. Yeah, I mean, Baltimore's 3-5 now, Miami's 2-7, and Baltimore's 3-5, and they were 1-5 2 weeks ago, and we're thinking, okay, here we go, Baltimore. For Miami, it's the opposite direction, and the big storyline out of this one, and maybe this podcast comes out tomorrow, and in this time between me recording it and the time the podcast comes out, we get news on Mike McDaniel, but I think he's done, man. I think this is it. And we see this a lot. We saw this with Brandon Staley and the Chargers a couple years ago. Sometimes when it's going bad for coaches, that Thursday night football collapse game, a lot of times is kind of that final nail in the coffin for coaches who are on the hot seat. The report before the game from me and Rappaport was, quote, his job is firmly up in the air. And he would, prior to the game, Rappaport said he will be judged on if players keep playing for him. In that first half, Miami was kind of holding pace. It was 14-6 or something like that going into half. And it was, Miami was holding pace with Baltimore for the most part. Miami was just shooting themselves in the foot with turnovers. There was a fumble earlier. The penalties, especially pre-snap penalties, were a big issue for Miami. But, they were engaged in the game, and for the most part, they kept the Ravens' offense quiet. I mean, one of those early Ravens touchdowns was off of a fumble that put the Ravens at Miami's 6-yard line. It was the Ravens just ran it in, or it ended up being a pass to Mark Andrews. But the defense kind of was doing its thing, and the offense was just giving it no favors. And in that first half, they were fighting. In the second half, they packed it in, and they couldn't do anything. They turned the ball over more. Malik Washington had a fumble. Tua had a really bad interception. Not good. And the McDaniel era, if I had to put money on it, I think it's over. And it's going to be over, regardless of if he gets fired after this game or not. The big question is, when is he getting fired, not if he's getting fired. Because right now, this team is 2-7. If they lose, another game or two, they're not going to be at 500. There's no way they're going to be at 500 with a 2-7 record. And it's just brutal because 2 years ago, we were looking at Miami, at this point in the year as this electric team. They put up 70 against Denver that one week. Fireworks, and it just hasn't worked out. And I talked about this on the pod earlier in the week, the recap pod of week 8. Culture is such a big thing, and the McDaniel era has kind of set a culture that, isn't really based on winning. It's more based on fireworks and big plays and speed, and that just doesn't work in the NFL. I feel like it's become overdone on this podcast of me talking about how much culture matters in a locker room and an organization. So I'm not going to blab about that anymore. But it's clear the Miami era under McDaniel it's over. And it was fun for a bit, but it wasn't sustainable long term. It always fell down late in seasons, and this year it never really got going early in the season like it normally does. So yeah, not good. And Miami, looking at the roster, it's time to full rebuild. I think they should send off a lot of guys at the deadline and really keep Achane and Waddle on offense, build that offense around those two guys, and then on defense, maybe keep a player or two. Chop Robinson's a good young edge rusher. Maybe keep Jalen Phillips. Definitely trade Phillips or Chubb because teams are going to need edge rushers. You could get some good compensation for those two. But, yeah, not ideal for Miami at all. On the other side, Baltimore, Lamar looked a little off coming back. He looked a little hesitant. He wasn't really running as much as he normally does. And I think that was just a product of being out of the lineup for a bit, trying to kind of work his way back to game speed. He ended up looking good, but there's an issue with Lamar this year, man, and it's partially an O-line issue and it's partially a Lamar issue. He just refuses to throw the ball away, man. Even tonight, he took a lot of unnecessary sacks, and he's really good at that dancing thing, but when he's a little like shy to go take off and run and he's constantly looking down the field, that's a good thing. But at some point, you're going to get sacked. You can't keep dancing. And it just feels like even before the hamstring injury, he was doing this, especially in that Detroit game earlier in the year, the Week 3 Monday Nighter. He just takes too many sacks. And that's an issue. Baltimore's 3-5. Like I've talked about, like many people talked about, including on the broadcast tonight, they have a very favorable matchup coming up. But this isn't the same Baltimore team that we've seen in previous years. So I think there's a very good chance they go on because of the schedule to go win this division. But I don't see them in the AFC Championship like they were last year. I do think there are 4 or 5 better teams in the AFC right now, pretty clearly, pretty definitively. KC, Indianapolis, New England, Buffalo, who beat Baltimore earlier in the year, and then Denver's and the Chargers are 2 teams that are kind of neck and neck with Baltimore. So that's my thoughts on it. That was Thursday Night Football. Rough night for Miami. Ravens are on a little win streak now. 2 wins in the last 4 days. So yeah. Now let's get to the rest of Week 9, and this is a big week, and there's one really notable matchup, and you saw it on the screensaver, and we'll get to Chiefs Bills a little later. On bye this week, we've got the Browns, Jets, Eagles, and Bucks, so 4 teams on bye. And we're going to start with the morning games, and we're going to start with probably the biggest morning game and one of the biggest storylines in the NFL right now. The Indianapolis Colts at 7-1. They're going to Pittsburgh to play the 4-3 Steelers. The Steelers have dropped 2 straight games, not in great fashion. Indy are 3.5-point road favorites here, 50.5-point over/under, and the Chiefs are rolling right now, not the Chiefs, the Colts. The Chiefs are rolling, but the Colts are rolling right now. But it just feels like a mismatch towards Pittsburgh right now because Pittsburgh's defense has been pretty atrocious, especially the last 2 weeks against Cincinnati and Green Bay. They had pretty bad outings, and this Indy offense is probably better than both those offenses. And those are 2 good offenses, but the Indy offense has been on another level. The one thing that does make me hesitate a little bit on the Colts in this game is the Colts haven't been on the road much this year, and when they have been on the road, it's been favorable. It's been 2 games in LA in a dome, and sunny Tennessee, like week 2 of the year, week 1 of the year, whenever that was. So this is, the Colts really haven't had to go play in like an East Coast or a Midwest like outdoor weather game yet. But looking at the weather, it looks like it's going to be sunny and stuff, and there'll probably be some wind and stuff. But that was my one small hesitation with Indianapolis for this game. Other than that, give me Indy. Pretty simple. They have so much momentum on them, and when you've got a team rolling like the Colts are and you've got a team on the downhill like the Steelers are, it just feels obvious, and I think 3.5 points isn't enough for Indy. So if I can take Indy at 3.5 points, even if that line moves to 4.5 points, I'm still taking it. They just look so good, and this could be another Jonathan Taylor 3-touchdown game. He's already had several of them this year, and this Pittsburgh defense is not good, not ideal. There's rumors that they're looking for defenders at the deadline and another wide receiver, and they need both. This isn't a well-rounded, complete roster. There's a lot of big names, a lot of talent on this roster, but it's not a complete roster. Indianapolis is great, and what they've done really well this year is they just force teams to become one-dimensional and just throw the ball, partially because their defense is really good at stopping the run, also partially because their offense just scores so many points, and Pittsburgh isn't the type of team that's going to be able to drop back a bunch and air the ball out, right? They're very dependent on their run game and on their play action, so this just feels like just a team mismatch here. So give me Indy pretty comfortable in this one. If you can bet them 3.5 at -3.5, -4.5, I'm taking it for sure. That's one. I'm not a huge betting man, but that's one of the bets I will be putting this week because it feels too obvious, and I hope it's not a trap game, and I hope I'm not wrong, but yeah. Next, I want to go to Detroit here. The Lions coming off of a bye are 5-2. They're hosting the 3-4 Vikings. Detroit 9.5-point favorites, 48.5-point over/under. J.J. McCarthy's back from Minnesota. It's not Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is done for the year. He's been playing on a freaking torn labrum. That dude is so tough. He's always been so tough. And I think McCarthy back, a lot of people are going to go, oh, whatever, because they saw the 2 games with McCarthy earlier in the year. I think I think it matters more than people are leading on to believe. I think that J.J. McCarthy, there's a reason he was the starter at the beginning of the year, not Carson Wentz, not just because they had first-round capital on him, they want to play him. I think J.J. McCarthy is a legit, NFL, I don't know, it's TBD, but regardless, from what I've seen this year, I still do think McCarthy is the guy in Minnesota over Carson Wentz. Obviously, Carson Wentz isn't an option anymore because he's hurt. So I think the offense is going to see a little bit of an uptick, but the Lions are coming off of a bye. They're rested. And in spots like this, especially even against divisional opponents, normally teams, we see them, struggle against divisional opponents to score points. The Lions tend to. They scored a lot of points against Chicago at home this year, and I think it'll be more of the same, especially because Minnesota's defense, especially the last 2 weeks, has really been giving up more points. They gave up points to Philly. They gave up a lot of points to the Chargers. Vikings are coming off of a mini bye because they played the Thursday night game last week, but the Lions are coming off of an actual bye. So give me Detroit in this one. 9.5 points seems a little steep to me. So what I've seen in these spots for the Lions, like I mentioned, is they tend to score big points. So for that reason, I kind of like the over on this game at 48.5 points. That seems a little low of an over-under for me. So if you were to bet on this game, I'd say take the over. But this feels like a good Detroit spot for them to move to 6-2. And hey, if the Vikings can win this, move to 4-4, all of a sudden they're only a game behind Detroit. If that happens, I think this is a big game for Minnesota, and if they win this game, this could very well set them up for more success later in the year. I just think Detroit is probably a little too good for them this year, and Detroit doesn't tend to fumble these interdivisional games against teams that they're clearly better against. The one thing Dan Campbell doesn't do is he usually doesn't play down to his opponents. Usually if they play a team that's better, they mollywop them. So I like the Lions in the spot for sure. The next game I want to get into, Denver at 6-2, the red-hot Denver Broncos are going to Houston to play the 3-4 Texans, who are coming off of a good win themselves. Surprising line in this one, kind of makes sense. Houston are 1.5-point favorites, so basically a pick 'em, but Houston's the slight favorites. Over-under is at 40.5. Yikes, but that reflects how good these two defenses are. It just does. I've said it on this podcast multiple times. The 3 best defenses in the league, in no specific order, are Houston, Denver, Seattle. And this is 2 of those 3 right here. And what happened when the Texans played Seattle a couple weeks ago didn't look that great for Houston. I think even though Houston is a trendy pick here, this feels like a trap. This line, them being slight favorites, it feels like a trap to me. It really does. I think even though Denver's down Patrick Surtain, which is huge, that's the defensive player of the year. He does so much for them. Denver's pass rush is still elite. Nick Bendito is one of the most underrated players in the league, and he's one of the best pass rushers in the league, period. I think, even though we saw Houston figure some stuff out on offense last week, that was against San Francisco, down Bryce Huff, down Utor, no pass rushers whatsoever. And this week they're playing against Denver, who does have a pass rush. They're going to get to Stroud, and what we saw in that Seattle game a couple weeks ago is when you put pressure on Stroud, when you put pressure on this offense, they crumble. And I want to believe that the Texans figured some stuff out, but we thought going into that Seattle game that they'd figured some stuff out, and it turned out it was just a matchup that favored the Texans offense. That's what I think it was against San Francisco last week. I think Denver's defense is very, very good. I think we're not going to see Denver's offense rolling like it was against Dallas and like it was in that fourth quarter against the Giants, because this is a different level of defense in Houston. But I trust the Denver offense to deal with an elite defense rather than I do the Houston offense dealing with an elite defense. Even though they're down Surtain, that pass rush in that front will still get to Stroud enough to kind of offset losing Surtain in this game. So I like Denver here, but it'll be a close game. It'll be a fun game. If you really enjoy high-level defense, this will be the game. DeMeco Ryans has that Houston defense playing unbelievable. Their front with Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson is really good. They've got Derek Stingley, who's one of the best corners in the league. It would have really been cool to see Surtain play in this game, because I think Surtain and Stingley are probably the 2 best corners in the league, and to see them play head-to-head would have been fun, but I still like Denver in this one. The next game, the final morning game I want to talk about in depth, Green Bay, yeah, they're 5-1-1 and they're hosting Carolina, who's 4-4. This line is wild. Green Bay is favored by 13.5 points, 44.5 point over under. I understand it, considering what we just saw the Bills do to Carolina. In Carolina, this one's going to be at Lambeau in Green Bay. It feels a little disrespectful to a Panthers team that is 4-4 after all, but I kind of understand it if we're just looking off of what happened last week. Green Bay kind of beat the brakes off of Pittsburgh. I was very wrong in my prediction about that one. The Panthers got the brakes beat off them by Buffalo. It turned out last week, that the Panthers rely on Bryce Young a little more than we thought they did. Because Andy Dalton came in, and a lot of people like me kind of thought, I don't think the drop-off from Bryce Young to Andy Dalton is that crazy. I still think the offense will be able to operate in a similar manner. And it turned out it mattered a lot because that offense could not do anything, and Dalton looked really bad. Now, it turns out he played with a broken finger in this game, so we can cut him a little slack. Regardless, I think the Panthers, they rely on Bryce Young a little more than we realize, and I think that's credit to Bryce Young. He's had his moments where he hasn't looked great, but Bryce Young's one of those guys that kind of just progressively gets better throughout the season, and he's only out for one game. It looks like he's going to be back this week. So I think Carolina will play a little tougher than people realize. This is a big Josh Jacobs game for Green Bay. Carolina has a really good pass defense, but they're kind of questionable against the run game, so I think this kind of plays into the Packers' hand with how they love running the ball and stuff. It'll be a little harder for Green Bay to pass on them than it would be against a team like Pittsburgh last week, but they'll still have that run game available. And, Green Bay's coming off of that heater, but last week I predicted Green Bay to lose to Pittsburgh, and I stand by my logic in that one. But I kind of went back and I looked through the Green Bay schedule, and I thought back to the Green Bay games I've watched this year, and maybe I'm going to be, I promise I'm not a Green Bay Packers hater. I promise you, I have no ill will towards the Packers. I'm neutral on the Green Bay Packers. To me, this kind of feels like the Packers played down or up to their opponents this year. And what I mean by that is the three best teams they've played on paper, in my opinion, Detroit, Washington, Pittsburgh, and this was Washington like before all the injuries. This was with McLaurin and Jaden Daniels. They kind of beat the brakes off of those three teams, Detroit, Washington, and Pittsburgh. Then they kind of played against Cleveland, Arizona, and Dallas. They lost to Cleveland. Their offense couldn't score any points in that game. Arizona was a very close game. Arizona plays all of their opponents tough, but it was still a very, very close game. And then Dallas, the offense scored 40 points. Everyone does that against the Dallas defense. But then they let the Dallas offense walk all over them, and it ended up being a 40-40 tie. They play to their opponent's skill level. We see that in sports sometimes, in any sport, where some teams just they rise to the occasion against the good teams, and against the bad teams they play down to their level. And I think that could happen against Carolina this week. Now, I said they played down to the level of Arizona and Dallas. They tied Dallas and they beat Arizona in that game. I think because of this, I'm taking Carolina plus 13.5. That in no way means I think Carolina is going to outright win this game, but I just think that based on what we've seen from Green Bay, they play to their opponent's skill levels, and I think Carolina will keep it close enough. Carolina has a good enough run game, especially it sounds like they're going to give Dowdle more work, which he needs more work over Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard's a great back, but he just really hasn't been what Carolina wanted him to be this year. Rico Dowdle has been that. So I think the Carolina run game will be able to keep Green Bay off the field a little bit. I think Green Bay might have a hard time getting some of the explosives against Carolina. With that being said, Josh Jacobs will have a great game. The Green Bay run game and screen game will be top tier, and I think Green Bay wins this game, but by 13.5 points, like Vegas is saying, I'm not taking that. Give me Carolina plus 13.5. The other morning games, Chicago 4-3, playing against Cincinnati 3-5. These are two teams that desperately need wins. Cincinnati loses this game, they're probably packing it in, making some trades, including Trey Hendrickson. That'll be a big storyline ahead of the deadline on the 4th. Chicago is 4-3. They lose this game, they're going to fall further behind Detroit and Green Bay in that division. And, based on the pod and the Instagram reel I posted, my thoughts on Caleb Williams. So this is a really, really, really bad Cincinnati defense. And if Caleb Williams can have a good week, we're going to have some even more difficult conversations than we already were having. Atlanta at 3-4 is going to Foxborough to play the 6-2 Patriots. Patriots are rolling right now. Atlanta is doing the opposite of rolling. And Atlanta, yeah, it's just been rough for Atlanta these past few weeks. And I think New England has such an elite run defense this year. Atlanta only really plays good when they're able to play through Bijan and Algier in that run game. And if there's no run game here, I really do worry for the Falcons' sake. San Francisco, the Niners are 5-3. They're going to MetLife to play the 2-6 Giants. The most injured team in the NFL going to play on the MetLife turf. What could go wrong? I don't even want to think about what players are going to get hurt. Is this going to be the game that Christian McCaffrey gets hurt? I mean, all year he's the only Niner that stayed healthy, which is ironic because he's been the most injury-prone 49er. So is this the game? I really hope not, but if there is going to be a game for it to happen, it'll be against the Giants on that freaking turf. No scatter for the Giants. The Niners should win this game, but you never know. It's the NFL. The Chargers, 5-3, are going to Tennessee to play the 1-7 Titans, who frankly have been the worst team in the NFL this year, them and the Jets. At least the Jets have kind of been a fun watch at times. Tennessee is just a miserable watch. Poor Cam Ward. They need to get a legit they need a whole culture overhaul in Tennessee. But those are the other morning games. 3 afternoon games. The big one, the big game of the week. We always circle this, the schedule release every year. Kansas City versus Buffalo. And this is a big one. This is a bigger matchup than it has been in their previous regular season matchups. Chiefs are 5-3. Bills are 5-2. Kansas City are 2.5-point road favorites here in Buffalo. 52.5-point over-under. This is a huge game. This is the biggest game of the week and one of the biggest games of the year so far. Everyone's going to talk about Mahomes versus Allen. That's always what it's going to be when you've got the two best quarterbacks in the league. This is going to be the conversation that's had. But this is such a big game because both these teams really can't afford to lose at this point in the year, right? And the reason I say that is because normally when we get a Kansas City-Buffalo matchup, both the teams are like in the driver's seat of their divisions. At least that's how it has been the past few years. Both these teams are trailing in their division. And Chiefs are a game behind Denver. The Bills are a half game behind New England, which is a team that already beat them earlier in the year. If New England plays Atlanta, Denver plays Houston, right? The Denver-Houston game will be a little closer. New England should take care of Atlanta. Obviously, weirder stuff has happened. Atlanta's shown glimpses of potential this year. But if whoever loses this game between Kansas City and Buffalo, if they lose and the division leader ahead of them wins a game, that's going to really hurt those teams. I mean, there's a chance that we walk out of this week and that pod that's going to release next Tuesday, in which I'm recapping week 9, there's a chance I'm talking about the Chiefs 2 games back from the division lead, or the Bills a game and a half back from the division lead. So this is big for both teams because these teams aren't in the driver's seat of their divisions. Now, Kansas City is red hot. Mahomes has played unbelievable this year. He's firmly entrenched in the MVP conversation. 17 passing TDs to 4 interceptions, and the offense looks even better now that Rashee Rice has returned since his 6-game suspension to start the year. But, man, Kansas City lost some games early in the year. And even though they're playing good as of recently, those games will stay on the record. And right now you're in a division in which the Chargers are 5-3, tied with you, and the Chargers have the tiebreaker from week 1. The Broncos, are 6-2, a game above you. You still play Denver twice. You play them in 2 weeks. So this can't be a loss for Kansas City, because then they're going to fall 2 games behind Denver potentially, and a game potentially behind the Chargers, who already have a tiebreaker over them. You know, this is big. This is a huge game. And Allen, on the flip side, has had a couple rough games, but the offense has kind of found its rhythm. They had that bye week. They played Carolina, and they really found their rhythm. They really ran the ball very well. I can't say it enough, this is a huge game for both these teams, because whoever loses is going to fall further behind in their division. And I think we have real potential for a shootout, because in these Buffalo-Kansas City games in recent years, they haven't really been the shootouts like we saw in the infamous 2021 or 2022 playoff game. But I think this is a slight mismatch to Buffalo here. And Buffalo has a real issue at pass catcher. None of their pass catchers have really stepped up this year and become that number 1 for Josh Allen. And Kansas City, the way you beat them is through your passing game. It's not through the run game, because Casey's run defense is very, very good. And I think that Buffalo, until a pass catcher like a Keon Coleman, a Khalil Shakir really emerges as a clear number one, gives Allen a go-to guy, Buffalo's going to have to continue to lean on the run game, and that's going to be very hard to do against this Kansas City defense. So I like Kansas City as the road favorites here at -2.5 points. This is going to be a phenomenal game. This has a real chance to be old-fashioned shootout, but it just feels like a slight mismatch in terms of Kansas City's defense versus Buffalo's offense. And then on the other side of the coin, the Bills' offense is, the Bills' defense hasn't been great this year, and Kansas City's rolling. They're trending in the right direction on offense. So I like Kansas City here, but this is close, and regardless who loses this game, depending on how the other results go in terms of Denver, the Chargers, and the Patriots, these teams could put themselves in a hole that's going to be difficult to dig out of. I still think these two teams are the division favorites right now, like to win their divisions, but it's going to be an uphill climb for whoever loses this game, and that's what makes this game so great. Week 9, this is a beautiful placement of this game. I'm unbelievably excited for this one. Chiefs-Bills feels like it always delivers. There's never like Chiefs-Bills blowouts. They're always close games, and I'm really, really excited for this one. The other two afternoon games, New Orleans is 1-7. They're going to LA to play the 5-2 Rams. The Rams are coming off of a bye. Puka's back in that game. Tyler Shuck is going to be the starter the rest of the year, supposedly the rest of the year for the Saints. I don't think Spencer Rattler's really looked that bad this year. I just, it's clear that he's not, a starter in this league. He's probably a bridge starter / backup quarterback. I'd love to see him get a chance elsewhere. For the Saints, you took Shuck with the second-round pick, give him 8 games to start, see how he plays. I think the Rams probably roll in this one, but it'll be interesting to see how Shuck plays. And for fantasy owners like myself, Puka, please do not get hurt. I'm begging of you, please do not get hurt. The other afternoon game, this is a real barn burner. 4-3 Jacksonville takes on the 2-5 Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders have not looked good this year. Jacksonville was looking good, then they lost 2 straight against Seattle and an ugly, ugly one against the Rams in London. This is probably a Jacksonville bounce back spot. They're coming off of the bye, and the Vegas Raiders defense is not the Seattle defense or the Los Angeles Rams defense. So that game is that game. Sunday Night Football this week, an interesting one. Before the year, this was a better matchup than it is now, but still could have some potential fireworks in this one. 5-2 Seattle is traveling to Washington to play the 3-5 Commanders. Seattle are 2.5 point favorites in this one on the road. 47.5 point over under. Daniels is back for Washington, but unfortunately Terry McLaurin is not. Those two swap places. Terry McLaurin re-aggravated that quad injury in the Monday Nighter against Kansas City this week, and this is really just a bad spot for Washington in this game because, you're getting Jaden back, which is huge, and you still have Debo, but no Terry. They're coming off of a short week in Kansas City in a pretty physical game against Kansas City, and they're playing a Seattle team coming off of a bye. So one team's on a short week, a day's less rest because they played on Monday night. Another team is coming off of plenty of rest and had plenty of momentum before the bye. I think this is a good Seattle spot here, but what we've seen this year is the games that Jayden Daniels has played, the Commanders have looked good. They have. They had a close game against Green Bay early in the year. Besides that game, they've played really well with Jayden Daniels this year. And we saw that against the Chargers in that game in LA, a game that many thought the Chargers should have won. And Jayden Daniels and that offense got going. Their defense was playing good. They kind of shut down the Chargers from the second quarter on. But Seattle's a different beast, man. I think Seattle is a legit Super Bowl contender. I mentioned it earlier. I think they've got a top 3 defense in the NFL with Denver and Houston. They're coming off of the bye. And Washington's defense, although it's good up front, they've got a good pass rush. They can get beat on the backside. They've got corners who are handsy, corners who play a lot of man-to-man, but get beat in man-to-man a lot. And I think this is a big Sam Darnold game. This is, of course, a big JSN game. And I'm not saying that just because of the matchup. Jackson Smith-Njigba has been unbelievable this year. He's been the best receiver in the league this year. It's going to be even better in a plus matchup against a Washington pass defense. I picked up Sam Darnold in 2 of my leagues that I had Jalen Hurts, who was on bye, because I firmly believe Sam Darnold's going to have a great week throwing the ball through the air. And, yeah, man, give me Seattle in this one. But Jayden Daniels is still Jayden Daniels, and he has the ability to keep games close. 2.5 points feels like an easy line for Seattle, even though they're on the road. it just, for Washington, it's just been the inability to stay healthy on offense this year. It's really hurt them. And I think without Terry in this game, it's going to hurt them even more. They lose this game, they're 3-6. They play Detroit next week. If they lose this game and they're 3-6, and they know they still have to play Detroit next week, I think they have to play Philly 2 more times this year. This is going to be tough for Washington, and I think there's a real chance. I don't know if they'll do it, but I think they should really implore trading some of their veterans like Laramie Tunsil, Marshawn Lattimore, some of their older, aging guys that they brought in this year with the expectation of going for a Super Bowl this year after their NFC Championship appearance last year. If they go to 3-6 with Detroit and 2 games against Philly left on the schedule, they're in a really tough position. And I think with the deadline being on Tuesday, there's a real chance that they just sell if they lose this game and just pack it in for the year and focus on getting the young guys' development and come back next year, hopefully fully healthy with Jaden Daniels, with Terry McLaurin, etc. So, yeah, this is a big spot for Washington. This could be the nail in the coffin for the year, especially in a stacked NFC. So hopefully they get it, because when Washington's in the conversation, as we saw last year, they're really, really fun. But, it's going to be an uphill battle for sure if they lose this game. Monday Night Football. This is a funny matchup, man. This will be funny to open Twitter on the night of the matchup. The 2-5 Arizona Cardinals are going to Dallas to play the 3-4-1 America's team, Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are 2.5-point favorites here, 53.5-point over/under, which is very reflective of how bad the Cowboys defense is. Historically, this is a historically bad Cowboys defense, and they're playing maybe the most inconsistent offense in the league. It sounds like Kyler's going to be the starter for this game for the Cardinals, not Jacoby Brissett. What I'm curious to see is the last 2 weeks, Arizona has found a little bit of rhythm with their offense, but that was with Jacoby Brissett. So the question that I really want to see in this game, if Kyler is in fact starting, is it going to be... Is the Cardinals' offense playing good and finding their momentum? Was that a product of Jacoby Brissett, or was that a product of the offense just finding its rhythm altogether? I don't know. Now, if there's a matchup to keep it going, this is it, because the Cowboys' defense is horrible. But Kyler just has a way to make some really baffling decisions, make some really, really negative plays, and I'm just tired of this Kyler Murray talk. I just am. He's had plenty of chances to prove himself as an elite or a top-tier quarterback. He's not that, right? If Arizona were to go about replacing him, I don't know if you can find someone better off the street than Kyler Murray, but you sure as hell aren't winning a Super Bowl with Kyler Murray. So if Kyler has a shaky game against this Dallas defense, I'm going to be coming on the podcast ranting about Kyler Murray, similarly how I was ranting about Caleb Williams earlier in the week, where I'm just over it. If you can't do anything in this matchup, I'm over it, because we've seen Jacoby Brissett move the chains with this offense in back-to-back weeks. So now it's your turn, Kyler, and you don't have an excuse of a matchup to do it. So that'll be interesting to see. I do like Arizona here, though. And as much as I hate Kyler, I don't hate him, but as much as I just dislike how he plays as a player and the inconsistency, Arizona plays everyone close. They've played everyone close this year, it feels like. And Dallas is the type of team, they always have been and they always will be, that just makes crucial mistakes in close games. They just do. Dallas really, really struggles to win close games, especially this year, because there haven't been many of their 3 wins. I don't know if any of them are necessarily like close games. They kind of beat up on Washington, got out ahead. They kind of that Giants game was a close game. I'll give them that, but it was the Russell Wilson Giants. I don't know, man. I just think Arizona always plays games tough, and they've played a lot of good teams close. They also played the Tennessee Titans close and lost that game, which was not a good look. These are 2 mediocre teams who I don't think are playoff caliber for different reasons, but I do like Arizona here because I just trust Arizona a little more than I trust Dallas in this game. But, this could easily be a Kyler Murray stinker and Dallas wins by 20. This could easily be a Dallas defense is incapable of getting a stop. I don't know where this game's going to go. That's kind of what makes it funny. It'll be fun to watch just for entertainment purposes. This isn't 2 high caliber playoff teams, in my opinion, but it'll be fun to watch. it is worth noting this is Kyler coming back and playing in his home state. He's had some good performances in Dallas in the past, so we'll see. We'll see. I like Arizona in this game, but it's kind of a coin flip. These are two of the most unpredictable teams in the league. That's what makes this matchup fun. But yeah, like I've been saying, not a playoff caliber matchup at all. So yeah, and that's week 8. That's everything that I've got for you guys, or week 9, excuse me. So we already got going with that Miami-Baltimore game, whatever that was. We'll see if McDaniel gets fired. In the meantime, I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Next pod will more than likely be recapping this week that I just previewed for you guys, unless something notable happens with the UFC card. And that NFL preview pod, the week 9 recap pod that'll come out next Tuesday, that will come out trade deadline day. And there's a chance, usually I record podcast Monday night. There's a good chance that podcast comes out a little later like it did this week, just with the expectation of waiting to see how the trade deadline shakes out and stuff, so I can give my thoughts on that. But like I always say, if you are here till the end of the podcast, these podcasts don't get many views, and I'm really not tripping about it. Like I've said from the beginning, it's about practicing my on-camera speaking skills, and if there is anyone here towards the end of the podcast, just know I greatly appreciate you for sticking with me, and I'll see you guys later in the week. Later.